Hello, and welcome back to Curlington Stories. If you're new here, welcome to you too. I know you read the title and you're probably scratching your head wondering, how is this possible? Believe me, I thought the same thing when I came across this story, but some of you might have actually come to the conclusion that I did, but once I kind of thought about it for a second and realized that this is a surrogate situation. And boy, is it a situation indeed. I've never come across something this convoluted in my life. I was shocked at what I read today, and I know that you will be too. And this is a long story, so I'm not gonna keep you here waiting. We're just gonna get into it. You know, it's kind of ironic. There was this video I made, a story that I covered a while ago that involved a mother giving birth to a kid who didn't look much like the father, and he assumed that she had cheated. Turned out that the baby was in fact his. It's just there was some genetic tomfoolery going on that kind of had the kid look a little different. And I made this joke that like this is always, you know, the situation where it's like, oh, the dad probably, you know, obviously it's like if there's an issue of whether or not the baby belongs to someone, it's always going to be with the father, right? I'm like, it'd be impossible for it to be the mother, right? It'd be kind of difficult to give birth to a child that isn't yours. But then I came across this story, which is an example of how that can actually happen. Obviously, you know, not one-to-one, but pretty close. Am I the asshole to divorce my husband and leave him with a kid after finding out I'm not biologically the mom? I can't believe my life has come to this. All I ever do is go out of my way to help others, but on the few occasions I need help, nobody ever comes through for me. I, 36F, have been with my husband, 35N, for a total of almost 10 years, married for 7. We had what I thought was my child by surrogate over 2 years ago, because after 4 years of trying to conceive with no success despite medical interventions, turns out I'm unable to carry a child to term. I had always wanted to be a mom. Devastated is an understatement regarding how I felt when I found out I have a medical condition that would make it nearly impossible to carry a baby to term. It was even more upsetting when I had to go get a major surgery to remove uterine growths with the hope to increase fertility, and complications during surgery warranted a partial hysterectomy involving removal of my uterus only. I still had my ovaries, so we started looking into costs of a surrogate. It is really expensive. My close friend since college, who'd already had 2 kids of her own, offered to serve as the surrogate for us to cut down on cost. After 2 disappointing IVF sessions that did not result in pregnancy, she became pregnant on the 3rd try and carried a boy to term for us. I was so happy and busy after the birth, between being a mom and returning to work after a 4-week parental leave, so I didn't notice any warning signs. I should have noticed the red flags and warning signs early on, but did not because I was so exhausted from working so much at my stressful job and 2 part-time jobs to cover most of the bills and anticipated medical and legal costs associated with this friend becoming our surrogate. I was the primary breadwinner. My friends and my husband started talking more, and I would sometimes come home from my weekend job to find her already hanging out at our house when my husband was there. I chalked it up as innocuous, and it's good for her to know my husband better since she was in the process of hopefully carrying our child for us. I was grateful to have someone helping us have a child. I also thought it weird that our son has brown eyes when both of us have blue. Then I found out that while this is uncommon, it's possible, sometimes due to many genes controlling eye color. Recently, it all came to a head when I took our son to a doctor's appointment and they did metabolic panel and blood tests, which showed that he had a blood type that is not biologically possible to have with me as his mother. He's B+, I'm A+, husband is O+. Immediately, I started worrying it was the fertility clinic's fault and they'd messed up and implanted a wrong embryo. I started lining up lawyer consultations, possibly sue the clinic, and looked into having a DNA parentage test done. The test results showed that I'm not the mother, but my husband still is the father. I was heartbroken and angrier than ever. Talked to lawyers about medical malpractice and the fertility clinic we'd used. Then my husband confessed that he'd slept with my friend, our surrogate, on a few different occasions during our struggle to have her get pregnant with our embryos. This means what I thought was our son conceived by IVF and carried with a surrogate isn't my son at all, and was in fact conceived the old-fashioned way, which I can't ever do. Livid and absolutely broken at the time. Doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. I've been breaking down into crying spells over and over again about this. He claims he didn't ever think pregnancy could result because he pulled out. He had always assumed that he was the reason for our earlier struggles to conceive, both before my hysterectomy and during the IVF insemination process with this friend. Now, obviously there's way more to the story, which we'll get to in a second, but I just have to make a brief comment here. I thought in my head when I was reading this that maybe he did it because he thought that she wasn't going to get pregnant any other way, and he was just trying to give his wife wife a child, which again doesn't really justify what he did. It's still not what she was looking for. And if you were going to do something like that, you would probably want to get approval from your wife first. And I doubt she would have done that. But initially, that's what I thought. I thought it was like a good intentioned, really stupid thing to do, you know? But then he was saying, well, I didn't think she'd get pregnant. Like, what? Which means that he absolutely just cheated for the hell of it, not like for some idiotic, selfless reason. It was actually just typical, I'm a piece of shit, so I cheated on you scenario, which makes this even more disappointing than it already was. But let's continue. I felt an immediate triple betrayal. What was supposed to be my husband, my friend, and now knowing my child isn't even really mine, I had such white hot rage and delirium. I immediately left home and stayed at a hotel for almost a week before asking my parents to let me stay at home for a while. I admit I left our son with him. I'm now filing divorce because he cheated and betrayed me in the worst way possible. I have also cut off my friendship with my quote-unquote friend, the surrogate, and I feel afraid to trust anyone else now. I've seen a divorce lawyer to see about giving up my legal rights to this kid so I don't have to face such betrayal or owe child support. My husband and friend slash surrogate admit they were wrong and keep apologizing, but also called me immature and heartless to give up on my son like that. My parents also say I can't just give up on a kid that I went through so many legal and medical hoops to have. When I told them I refused to stay in a cheater marriage and I'd rather adopt someday with a better, more trustworthy partner, they also told me I was wrong, that maintaining my parental rights isn't much different than if I adopted outright. They said it isn't blood that makes a family. They're all about me divorcing my cheater husband, but keep telling me I'm making a mistake giving up my parental rights. Some of my other friends agree with what I'm doing. A few admitted they weren't big enough to swallow pride and care for an affair baby, or to see daily reminders of my friend slash surrogate's betrayal every time I look at her son. I just want a clean break and a fresh start. But I'm also looking at relocating several states away. Am I the asshole to give my parental rights in a divorce because a kid I paid a lot of money to have born by surrogacy isn't biologically mine at all, but the surrogates? Let me just say, wow, this story has a lot to unpack. It is a doozy, an absolute behemoth of an am I the asshole story. First off, let me answer her question. Is she the asshole for effectively wanting to abandon the baby? This is a loaded question. It seems like the child is roughly 2 years old, I think. They don't say the exact age, but it seems like it's implied because they said the surrogate happened like 2 years ago or something. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But regardless, the child is like either an infant or like a toddler. So this is the stage where, you know, a baby is forming bonds with their parents, especially, right? You know, your kid is going to be able to differentiate you as the parent versus anybody else very, very clearly. And they grow attached. You know, they want to be with their parents. You know, if somebody else tries to pick them up, a lot of times, you know, they'll cry and beg for their mom or their dad or something like that. So they have very likely developed a bond with you as their mother. And obviously they're not cognitive enough yet to really be able to discern, you know, who their mother is going forward, right? You know, if she just disappeared from their lives, from the baby's life, and, you know, 6 years later, that kid would have no memory of their mother, right? They wouldn't know. In fact, if she disappeared from that kid's life, right, and just stayed with her the biological mother, the biological father, and they never told anything about the previous woman who has nothing to do with the child's birth, they would never know. It would not affect their lives. Now, I'm not saying that this is what she should do, but I will say that it is solely on her. You know, I'm not going to say she's an asshole for deciding to do this to effectively abandon the child, because biologically that is not her child. That child does have a full biological family, technically, which it's unbelievably sad. I mean, I can't imagine what this woman is going through having this happen. I mean, the amount of betrayal is just shocking. I can't blame her for wanting to just fucking start over, get a clean slate, forget this ever happened, move on entirely, forget this kid even exists. You know, but seriously, as somebody who's on the outside, I feel like you have no place in telling her whether this is right or wrong. So unfortunately, my answer really just, I mean, I don't think so. But I really don't think it's up to anybody to decide whether or not she's an asshole or not for doing this. That's on her. And she feels like she can't go on loving this child and not resenting them, then maybe it's best for the kid. It's not like she is like the biological parent, or that the kid has aged to a point where they've developed a very clear memory and connection that will last the rest of their lives. I mean, if the kid was like 8 or 10 years old when they discovered this, I feel like that becomes much more of a moral dilemma to do something like that, because then you really are abandoning a child, like a child that knows who you are, knows your name, has called you mom, their whole lives, has seen you as their guardian, as their parents, as somebody they love deeply. I think that's really the only major distinction, is that this is at such an early age where, if they never hear mention of, this stand-in mother, they'll never even know. They'll never even know. But yeah, it really is ethically challenging. Well, let's just put it that way. To really come to a good conclusion here. I think whatever she decides to do is the correct move, regardless. Whatever she feels her heart is in, or at, or whatever, and follows that, it's the correct decision. The only decision that matters is what she decides to do, and I know that sounds very vague, maybe even a little confusing, but this is a confusing story. It's a very tough one, a very difficult one. Now, obviously, I have to condemn the infidelity here from the father. What a piece of shit. Wow, what an asshole. This poor mother who's trying so hard to have a kid, who's willing to pay all this money for a surrogate and stuff, and you go behind her back and cheat on her with her friend who's supposed to be the surrogate, and not even for the purpose of giving her a baby, just because you thought it'd be fun. Wow. I'm so happy that this woman is able to get out of this relationship before it's too late, before, she really grows those ties and connections between her and the kid. This is probably a best case scenario for such a horrifying, terrible situation. But I want to know what you guys think about this. I know this one's a doozy. It's got a lot of you probably scratching your heads like, what the fuck did I just listen to? But anyway, I do want to read maybe a couple of comments to kind of get a feel of what other people are saying. So the original poster actually put an update here. I didn't realize that, but here it is. Update. I'm low on time right now, but I will be posting a separate update post later. I'm not saying and I'm not caring for him anymore. I was not even offered a choice in the matter at all, which is why I've kept telling myself I shouldn't want to. Compare myself to men in a similar type of parented situation, and I've kept myself aloof toward the boy I thought was mine. I have no legal rights anymore, no matter what, because she fought to get her son back. I'm actually a lot more upset about losing this child than I presented in my post, and I'm realizing more and more with each passing day. The choice wasn't mine, and I lost. I posted that I wouldn't want to be the sucker raising someone else's kid, as much more of a cope than anything. She got to have her kid, he left me, and I'm stuck with nothing. Wow. That is painful to read. That is, wow. I've read a lot of stuff on these Am I the Asshole threads, but I've never read something this emotionally painful. Wow. Sorry if I made some of you cry. Don't worry, karma's a bitch. You didn't lose anything. That man is useless, so him leaving is a blessing in disguise. You should sue her too because she lied and took your money. She can take the useless bum. If you had a contract, you can most likely sue for fraud. This person says he cheated. It's not yours. I will absolutely tell you what I tell men posting this. It would be wonderful if you love the kid enough to stay, but if you're in shock and damns too much to do so, you aren't the a-hole for walking away. Not the asshole, and I'm glad to see most of the replies so far agree. I hope we keep this energy up for anyone put in this spot from now on. Not the asshole. Did you firm a contract for the surrogacy? Because you can sue them for scam. Also for emotional damage, I think your parents aren't thinking about you and your well-being. You see, that's something I've pointed out many times doing these stories, is that for some reason, most people are always backing the person who has been wronged, and by that it's typically the original poster. It's shocking. I think I phrased that wrong. They're usually not backing the person that's been wronged. They're usually backing the person who's done the wrongdoing, or in some way, shape, or form. Now, this one's not directly that, but they are saying, hey, don't abandon the kid, don't abandon the kid. And they're not really thinking about how she feels and her rights and her emotions in this situation. I mean, what's the point of staying in this kid's life if you're going to resent them for the rest of it? Every time you look at them, you're reminded of the infidelity um, that conceived this child, the betrayal from your friend, from your husband, your ex-husband now. And knowing that these two are probably likely together and in a relationship, and you've absolutely lost out. She hasn't lost out. In fact, like this person said, she's gained something extremely valuable. She's gained clairvoyance. Now she sees these people for who they really are. Piece of shit scumbags that she is better without. They're dead weight on her life. Now she can move on and maybe actually form some real connections with some real people who aren't subhuman trash. And let's be honest, she deserves that. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you did enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe button. Till next time.